Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This video is taking an obscene amount of takes to get right and I just keep butchering the intro, so I just keep stopping and restarting. I'm getting interrupted by neighbours trimming their lawn and God knows what. My brain is just mush. It is just mush. Anyway, excuse me if I am a little bit different in this video. It's so hot here in the south of England. It is still 27 degrees. It's gone 7 o'clock in the evening. It's hot. And I also have COVID at the moment. Third time's a charm. I'm hoping this is the last time. But I think the heat and having COVID at the same time is kind of just making me a bit delirious, really. I'm not sleeping great because of the heat, and then I think that's exacerbating like my cough that I've got, my COVID cough, that dry kind of chesty cough, and like some of the kind of coldy symptoms that I've got as well. So I'm hoping that I test negative soon and I can go back to work. But me and both my fiance, it's the first time he's tested positive. We're both off with it at the moment, so hopefully it doesn't linger for too long. But yeah, so I thought I would do a video today. This is why I look like this, because I have COVID and it's really hot, so I'm extremely casual today, so apologies. But I thought I'd come on and do a video all about my top reads of 2022. I decided at the beginning of the year that I was going to embark on a challenge that involves me choosing a favourite book that I have read each month. If you've watched a few of my videos and you've known me a little bit now, you probably will know that I really struggle to choose favourites in any sort of thing. You ask me to pick a favourite and I struggle. You ask me what my favourite chocolate is. That's pretty easy though, Dairy Milk. As long as it's Dairy Milk, I'll eat it. Well, no, actually that's a lie because I don't like fruit and nut. But you know, you ask me anything and I can't choose a favourite. I don't know why. I always have to pick a couple, 2 or 3. If you're kind of asked what my favourite film is, I couldn't just tell you a film, there'd be lots. So I decided to try and think more kind of critically and think more about what I'm reading throughout the year. So each month I pick a favourite book from the month, and then there's this like template that I use on Instagram, which basically then filters down to the first 2 months. You choose a favourite out of those 2 books, and then you kind of choose favourites from each month, and then you whittle it down to 1 book for the first half of the year, and then obviously you'll have 1 book from the second half of the year, and then you'll choose a favourite between them. I think it's also interesting because just because my book is, or a book is a favourite for 1 month, doesn't mean that it would necessarily be on like the top 10 list at the end of the year, because in 1 month you might read 2 or 3 really amazing books that actually you feel was better than the favourite book you chose from the month before, if that makes sense. So I think it will also be really interesting to see what my top book comes out of from the kind of like bracket system, but also what I think at the end of the year my favourite book is. So I thought this would be a fun video to do, talk you through some of the books that I've read. These are all new to me reads. I don't reread an awful lot, but this segues nicely into January's pick, which is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. And why I say this is because I actually reread House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas in January, and I decided at that point, going forward, as soon as I kind of was picking my favourite book at the end of the month, I'm not going to pick rereads as my favourites, which is also another reason why at the end of the year my favourite read is what I perceive to be my favourite read versus what this kind of bracket system chooses might differ as well. So I thought that was interesting. But The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren is my standout read for January, and I think it was also my first read. It was, sorry, I'm just knocking stuff over on my desk. It was my first read of the year, and it was my favourite read for January. This is about Olive and Ethan. They basically go on, Olive's sister is getting married and Ethan's brother is the groom. They're kind of like feuding, they're feuding, they don't have a good relationship, but Olive's sister won a honeymoon, and everyone at the wedding bar Olive and Ethan get food poisoning. Someone has to go on the honeymoon, but they have to pretend to be Olive's sister and Ethan's brother. They have to pretend to be a married couple, and I just really enjoyed this. It was a great book to start the year off. It was really readable, really easy. a little bit of angst, a little bit of drama. It was like the perfect sort of romance read. I highly recommend Christina Lauren. Since reading this, I have read 2 more Christina Lauren books this year so far, and I think I have at least another one on my TBR cart as well. So a great start to the year, and if you like fun romance reads, I do recommend this, and this is great for the summertime as well. I think this would be a great book to read, and also good for the wedding prompt as well for the Daisy and Me book club in July. We've got a wedding theme, so I think this would be a great pick for that as well. Roll into February, and obviously we had to get a Sarah J Maas book on here, didn't we? My favourite book from February was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. This is the 2nd book in the Crescent City series. Like I said, I reread House of Earth and Blood in the first month of the year, in January. I'm really looking forward to the next book after this. I won't go into details of what this is about because it's a sequel, but the Crescent City series focuses around Bryce Quinlan and Hunt Athalar. Bryce is half fae, half human, and Hunt Athalar is an archangel. Is he an archangel? He's an angel, and he is tasked with helping Bryce try and uncover some odd deaths that are happening in this world, and it's kind of a bit of a sort of urban fantasy in that the world, yes, okay, has fantastical elements, but it kind of has a feel a little bit more kind of like urban, a little bit more what we're used to. But the series as a whole so far I've really enjoyed, and I'm really looking forward to the 3rd instalment in this series. And I know this has had a little bit of negative reviews. Lots of people got spoiled for the end without like warnings, which is really sad in this kind of like sector, this like kind of posh portion of the internet. It's really sad that people kind of do that and spoil people when a book is so newly released, which I know affected several people's viewing readings and views on it because they knew kind of what was going to happen by the end. And it is a little bit slower, and there's a little bit more sexual tension in it, which is probably not necessarily needed, but still a great instalment in the series. And like I say, I'm really looking forward to the next one. So when I had to pit these 2 against each other, I don't know if this is any surprise to you, but I chose House of Sky and Breath. So the next book that I chose in March, my favourite read of March, is The Last Thing to Burn by Will Dean. This was actually a book that I read for a local book club to me, and it's been really great this year to go to book clubs. I've been really enjoying it. I've met some lovely people through it. I think I mentioned in the previous video that I did about local book clubs that I've actually managed to get myself involved in more than one, and it's just been really great to read some books that I wouldn't normally even think about picking up, and this is kind of a testament to that. This is a thriller. This is about a lady called, I can't remember what her name is, but she's called Jane, but she has I can't remember where she comes from. This is awful. She's basically being held hostage by her husband in the house in the kind of the Norfolk Broads, like the flatlands of Norfolk, and she lives in a small farm cottage, and basically it's all about her being trapped and stuck, and it was amazing, really. It was really gripping, it was really harrowing, and for such a small, it's quite a small book, it packed a real punch, and yeah, I really rooted for the characters in this one, and I really enjoyed it, and it was very different from my kind of normal things. I don't often read thrillers or anything like this, so it was really interesting to read. So I also had to pick these 2 against each other, and in this instance I did pick House of Sky and Breath, which then meant that my next kind of like choice was between House of Sky and Breath and House of Sky and Breath. So House of Sky and Breath obviously won that. So this is the one that's going to be pitted against another book for the second half of the second quarter of the half of the you know what I mean. In April, my pick was All My Mothers by Joanna Glenn. Again, this was picked for same book club as this one, and this was an amazing story. This is all about Eva. She is an only child, she's full of questions, and the book actually spans a large portion of her life, right from a young age where she kind of starts school, right then through to, I don't know if it's actually explicitly said, but through to kind of her late 30s, early 40s. And this has a kind of overarching message of motherhood, you know, relationships and mother figures, and family and found family. And she asks questions about like where she actually really comes from and her heritage. She comes from, you know, another country, and it's really interesting seeing her living in England but having had roots in, you know, a foreign land, and kind of not knowing where you fit in. So this was again really interesting, really lovely read. I've really enjoyed reading some more kind of like literary fiction this year as well, and I think this kind of would fall into that category. And yeah, I just thought this was amazing, and has stuck with me as well, and some of the messages behind this has really kind of stuck with me, and I loved tabbing this one as well. I've been enjoying tabbing my book club picks because it's been really nice kind of like being able to kind of like look back when you're in a discussion with a group of people, and kind of you can literally pick a quote, a specific quote you want, and you can find it quick and easy. My favourite book in May is The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. I can't really talk too much about why this is my favourite because it's spoilers, but I've talked about this before on my channel, but Beth O'Leary for me was an author that was very meh. I loved the flat share. The Switch was okay, and the more I kind of think about the Switch, the more kind of mediocre it feels. And I really didn't gel with the road trip. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like how it was done, and I just didn't enjoy it. Basically, it wasn't what I was expecting, and I just didn't have a care for it really. The No-Show was a book that I was just going to skip and miss, and Daisy then read it and said, "Sophie, you really need to read this book. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and I think you need to give Beth O'Leary another go, another try, because this book was amazing." So I picked it up, albeit a bit begrudgingly in hardback, but the rest of my, bar the flat share, the rest of my Beth O'Leary books are in hardback, so I kind of wanted hardback to match. And this book was amazing. This is about three women who are all stood up, Siobhan, Miranda, and I can't remember the other lady's name, Jane. They're all stood up, and the narrative kind of by the same man on Valentine's Day, and the kind of narrative all kind of runs through, you follow all three of these women, and this is amazing. This was amazing. I didn't expect this to blow me away as much as it did. So when I had to choose between these two books, surprisingly, I actually picked The No-Show. That's how much of a kind of like, that's how surprised I was by it, that I actually chose The No-Show. And then the final book that I read, that I chose for my June favourite, is A Man Called Uva by Fredrik Backman. Again, this was a book that was for a book club, but this was actually one that I picked. So I didn't really feel like it was, you know, someone else picking it. Oh, great. But it was one that I picked, and I kind of picked some titles strategically because I knew I had them on my shelves. This was amazing. The character of Uva was such an interesting character. It was really interesting to get his life and his kind of history and where he came from and his childhood, and kind of like the earlier stages of his life kind of interspersed throughout the narrative as well was really interesting, and kind of building a bit more of an image of who Uva was. He's a very grumpy man, and he thinks he's surrounded by idiots, and he's lonely basically. And again, this kind of gave me kind of a bit of a literary fiction kind of feel to it. It is translated. It's translated from, I don't know what the original language is. Translated from the Swedish. Excuse me. And I just really fell in love with Uva, basically, and just wanted to give him a great big massive hug. And at the end of the book, I was in tears, and kind of gave me similar feels in a sort of way to All My Mothers. Not that they're similar books, but the kind of the feelings that they evoked from me were very similar. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it, and highly recommend it to anyone that's not read it before. However, I would just say that there are trigger warnings for suicide in this, so if that's something that's triggering to you, then I would maybe do a little bit more research about this book before you choose to pick it up. So then obviously I had to pick between The No Show and A Man Called Uva. I picked A Man Called Uva, which then meant that I had to pick between these two again, which obviously had to mean that I picked A Man Called Uva, because between the way that the categories and the brackets fell, I couldn't then pick that once and then that the second time. So A Man Called Uva came up in the kind of like semi-final. So then the final, well actually this is sort of the semi-final, is between these two books, House of Sky and Breath and A Man Called Uva. And I have to admit that A Man Called Uva has won. And I have to just kind of like say this, that this is actually a really big thing, because it would have been really easy to just pick House of Sky and Breath, because I love this series so much and it's Sarah J Maas and kind of all the hype around it. But I thought about it and I thought, actually, this one I think will have more of a lasting impact on me. And also they're very, very, very different books, and I feel like comparison wise it's a little bit unfair to compare them really, because they're such different reads. But I think it's also worth noting that at this point a book like All My Mothers didn't necessarily get pitted against the best book, and I think this one would still potentially be in my like top 10 books of 2022, if that makes sense. I think this is just probably getting really confusing, but what I'm trying to get at is that because of the books choices and the books that get pitted against each other, there's not so much choice. Anyway, so my favourite book according to this kind of format for the first half of the year is A Man Called Uva. So obviously at the end of the year I will have another book that makes it to the semi-final, and then we'll get pitted against A Man Called Uva in the final, and I'm really intrigued to see what that book will be, and I'm really intrigued to see what my thoughts are come the end of the year, when I've got all of these books. Would there be some that actually I feel like they would have got higher if they weren't pitted against the book they were pitted against? For instance, this duo, etc, etc. But I do feel like I'm having a really amazing reading year so far, and I feel like I've read some amazing books this year. There's not been too much kind of like that I've not enjoyed. There's been a couple, but nothing major, and I kind of feel like I've read so many good books that it makes the challenge of picking a book each month actually really quite difficult, because there's several books that I've kind of got up in the mix, and it's really good as well, I think, kind of getting myself to try and pick favourites every month and kind of think about, well, why would I pick that, and thinking about the books that have kind of a lasting impact on me, kind of, and that I think I'll come back to in the future. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear about what your top books of the first half of 2022 are for you as well. Have you read any of these books this year, and would you agree with me or would you disagree with me? Would you agree that A Man Called Uva should be my favourite book of the first half of the year? Do you agree that this should even be on the list? I'd really love to hear about your favourite reads down below in the comments, and like I say, if you've read any of these, I'd also love to hear about your thoughts on these books as well. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!